All right, everyone, welcome in to episode 14 of the Instant Review podcast, where we discuss all things NFL, all things news, game recaps, predictions, what is going to happen here as we head into the last month of NFL play. And as the title says, this playoff race is going to be something that perhaps we've never seen before here in the first 18-week season in NFL history. My name is Nicholas Hill. I'll be your host throughout this podcast. Joining me is Leon Taryan, Conor Kennedy, and Oscar Orengo. Guys, how are we feeling right now? We're getting, obviously we're getting the holidays now, which means one thing: playoff push.
Yeah, feeling pretty
Things are
good.
getting interesting.
Yeah, it seems like nothing is any more certain than it was a week ago. It might even be that much more hazy and murky, but it's good. It's got to be good for football. It's got to be good for football fans. We're gonna be stuck to our TVs for the next 4 weeks, trying to see how this all pans out. So it should be fun. It should be a really intense last 4 weeks.
Yeah, everybody's good in the AFC apparently, so we don't know what's going to happen with all the seedings. So I'm excited for these next 4 weeks.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much to break down here. So let's get right into it. What's our review, Leon? I don't know, you want to talk about perhaps the most impressive play of the weekend?
So I can confirm that Justin Herbert is not from the planet Earth. He threw maybe the throw of the year to Jalen Guyton. Oh my God. Justin Herbert, it was 2 minutes before, or just under 2 minutes before halftime ended. Justin Herbert moves to the right. He literally plants his foot, and the second away, it gets swatted out of his hands. He throws it, a 66-yard bomb to Jalen Guyton. Oh my God. Even the cameras on the TV screen, they had to keep up with that. But unfortunately, it was against my New York Giants. Saquon Barkley had a touchdown, which was good. But wow, we are struggling. I did not expect us to give up 37 points. I set it to 30 and under, but I would say even though we would get destroyed. But wow, good for Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I absolutely have to agree. I mean, that throw is one of the most impressive throws you'll ever see. Historically, I mean, the question is how many quarterbacks could do that? I mean, right now, I think maybe Rodgers and Mahomes might be the only ones right now that have that type of arm strength. And throughout history, I don't know how many more you could think of. Maybe like a Dan Marino potentially had that type of arm strength. Maybe Ben Roethlisberger in his heyday had that type of arm strength. But it's really hard otherwise to think of many other quarterbacks that could make a throw like that. And it just shows the true unlimited potential of Justin Herbert. And it's scary that he's making a throw like that under pressure in only his second year in the NFL.
So something that I said a little bit earlier before the podcast started, Justin Herbert's arm, like watching that throw, his arm is probably stronger than most punters' legs in this league. Something I will say about Herbert, like him and Mahomes, like really messed up the curve in terms of the expectations of like first and second year quarterbacks. Like the time for them to really develop and prove that they're franchise guys is like shortening quite a bit. And that's, comparing him to other rookie quarterbacks who have a lot of high expectations, like for them, it's pretty concerning. For Justin Herbert, we might be able to put him at least at a tier 2 quarterback kind of ranking, if not an elite quarterback ranking. Like his arm talent is off the charts and his mobility is great too. A great dual threat quarterback. And, if all things go well, if he doesn't get injured too much, then who knows? Maybe the Chargers could lose their reputation of charging up things. And maybe he could bring a Lombardi to the city of Los Angeles.
Yeah, they're going to have a huge opportunity this week for sure to perhaps get my term AFC Falcons off of them. Because to me, if they can sweep the Chiefs, maybe I'll have to retire that name, especially with Justin Herbert. Oscar, do you have any thoughts on the Chargers right now?
I think Justin Herbert's always been kind of like that good second year guy. He hasn't been as flashy as he was last year, but I think expectations for him were still pretty good. And I think this game, I think a little bit of it was the Giants defense not being as competitive as other teams the Chargers have played lately. but yeah, it definitely showed like his potential in the future, being able to do that and have a successful. I think they were without Allen this game as well, and he was able to still make those passes. He didn't get to 300 yards, but yeah, he's definitely got a lot of potential, and I think it's good for the league. Kind of like what Nick said, like it's real hard to have a lot of these guys show that they're good franchise guys that teams don't need to move on. Teams are definitely more fickle than they used to be, and getting trades and moving guys if they don't have the success that they think they should have. So yeah, definitely good to see some guys stick around.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, Chargers have a huge game this week against the Chiefs, which I know we'll definitely talk way more about later on the podcast. But Connor, I know you want to talk about your Bills for a minute here, as they had a really interesting game on Sunday afternoon against the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go on a rant like I did last week. But this was a weird game. It started off like a lot of Bills games that don't end up too well. Both the offense and defense were sputtering quite a bit. Defense couldn't stop the run. Offense couldn't really get anything off the ground. A lot of punts. And with that Tampa Bay offense, it's going to cost you quite a bit, especially considering how conservative McDermott has become. I think like ever since that AFC Championship game, but maybe like I think after that Tennessee Titans game, he might regret going forward on 4th and 2 or 4th and 1 near the end of that game. So he's kind of turned into more of a conservative coach in terms of kicking field goals instead of going for it, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I can see where he's coming from. But either way, like I said earlier, when you're playing a team with such a high-powered offense like the Buccaneers, field goals can't win you games. Like, you got to go for it. So they started the game 17-3. I think I might be wrong on that, but like they were at a pretty huge deficit and things weren't looking good. And then Josh Allen, man, like he really showed up in this second quarter. He really showed why the Bills are going to start paying him the big bucks in a couple years, why people thought he was an elite quarterback coming out of his 2020 campaign last season. And he did really well. And the run game actually showed up too, oddly enough. I think the pass game kind of opened up the run game. Devin Singletary was finding some holes alongside Matt Breida. And the defense held on a bit more than they did in the first half also, and they almost made a comeback. They went to overtime. Sadly, of course, that Tom Brady 5-yard pass kind of won the Bucs the game after that 3-and-out for the Bills. But I think that there's something to build on with that second half. That's the Bills team that I think we all thought they were, at least like a couple months ago, and also in 2020. I don't know if the defense is as good as we thought it was. I think we definitely overrated that quite a bit. But if the offense can come back to a more pass-heavy thing, but also incorporating the run game in a way that supplements that pass game quite well, then I think that they could really bounce back this season. I mean, there's a lot of get-right games for most of the rest of their schedule. I mean, they're playing the Panthers the Sunday, as well as they're also playing the Falcons and Jets. So those three shouldn't be challenging, but then again, the Jaguars beat us. So who knows? But we're also playing the Patriots.
That happened. Geez. Like after watching them this past week.
Yeah, that was a horrible game. And I'll talk about how horrible the Jaguars are to watch later. But we'll also be playing the Patriots, I think December 26th, and that game is going to be really important. I think the division is already out of question for the Bills right now. But I think that if they can beat the Pats, then they can prove a lot of people wrong, prove to them that the Bills are not frauds, like I thought they were. And, maybe they could win more than one playoff game, if not, just be a first-round exit. Who knows? Maybe the Bills could be the team that we thought they were early on in the season.
This is really weird, like seeing the Bills 7-6. Like compared to their offense last year, they were 13-3, number one offense in the league, and now Stephon Diggs hasn't had really as big of impact at all as he did last year. It's sort of like we're hearing more about Gabriel Davis, Cole Beasley. I think Dawson Knox is probably the biggest target that we hear about in NFL media. But I do still expect the Bills to make the playoffs. But 7-6, it's very strange to see.
Yeah, I really think there's the issue, to me at least. I understand that the Bills running backs aren't the best, but I think at times they have to rely so much in the pass game that it prevents them from having a solid enough balance. I mean, more often than not, Josh Allen is the team's leading rusher. It kind of reminds me a little bit of this guy, Matt Corral at Ole Miss in college, how he plays a similar role where he's having to throw a lot because the team's running backs aren't very good, but he's also having to run a lot, and the wear and tear that's associated with that. And really, I think allows the opposing defenses to really key in on Allen. And so that's something the Bills are really going to have to address this offseason. They got to get a running back who can take a little bit of pressure off of Josh Allen and open up some more possibilities for this Bills offense. And maybe some of that goes back to Brian DePaul and some of the play calling, because I think some of the play calling at times is questionable. And what their fourth quarter rally showed is that the Buccaneers have one particular deficiency that we've seen all year, and that's their secondary, because they've been injured from the beginning. And if you can get the ball beyond their front seven, then you can have success on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For why they couldn't take advantage of that for the first three quarters, it's anyone's guess to see. But to me, it's a lack of balance and perhaps some questionable play calling at times. And that's something you really can't fix at this point, because the trade deadline's passed. Your options in free agency aren't very good at this time, so you're just going to have to basically go as far as I think Josh Allen takes you. And plus, the defense recently has just not been as great as they were at the beginning of the year. And part of that is better competition, because, obviously in the first 4 weeks, you had shutouts against Miami and Houston, who Miami at the time was terrible, and Houston is still one of the worst free teams in the league. So I do think this last 4-game stretch, I think they should go 3-1. But, in terms of what they can do in the playoffs, I'd see a first or second round exit, just because I don't think they have the balance necessary in offense. And I don't think that the defense is playing quite up to what they are capable of, at least at the moment.
I would like to respond to what Nick was saying in terms of the run game. Like you said earlier, the running backs on our roster aren't exactly like top tier guys. But I think one of the biggest problems in terms of our run game is our offensive line. Something that I think is overlooked quite a bit is that we haven't had all of our starting 5 offensive line on the field, I think, since maybe the Miami game, if not that Titans game, Monday Night Football a couple months ago. We've been rolling with guys that are like backups or, kind of practice squad-esque guys at the guard position. Not that our guards are really top tier anyways. I think we definitely have to, answer that position group. Honestly, that might be number 1, kind of tied with the D tackle position. I think we need a run stuffer for sure. But with the guard position, like, especially with some of the play calls that Daboll's been, writing up, you can't run it up the gut with guys that can't block. And that was on full display, I think, in that Patriots game. They tried to run it up the middle with Zach Moss, and they couldn't really get anything off the ground. They'd go 3 and out on like most of those drives. With the Bills, and I think also with Leon's team, the Giants, like, those two teams are, really direct proponents of the concept that, no matter what kind of running back you have, whether it's a Saquon Barkley or whether it's a Zach Moss, like, you can't really get much of anything off the ground if your O-line isn't up to snuff and can't, run block well and create holes for your running backs to run through.
I think I agree with Conor on that. I think you see how, kind of like how Nick said, Josh Allen was their best running back option. And that probably speaks a little bit to like the pass protection he gets on those plays, that the play gets extended so much that he can actually run and get out there and do what he needs to do on the ground. Because it's not like for lack of trying from the Bills. They got Devin and Singletary. They went out. They got Matt Breida. They got Zach Moss. They just haven't been able to get what they need out of that. And that's exactly what I was going to ask Connor. If he could speak to this being a Bills fan, what is the O-line doing there? That's the imbalance that Nick seems to see, like where your quarterback has to be the guy that's running. And he's effective. The guy's running for over 100 yards, and the guy's throwing for over 300 yards. So Josh Allen is like the keystone for this offense. And we saw that when the Patriots neutralized him, the Bills couldn't do anything. And this time they were able to do something against the Bucs, and he was effective, and they got hot. So definitely finding a couple more pieces that would help them. Probably that offensive line, getting some upgrades on that offensive line, get that running game going. Probably even give him more opportunities to do even more awesome things than what we get to see. So that would be pretty cool. But yeah, I think Nick hit it right on the head. I think the offensive line is what's holding a lot of this team back and not giving them the success that they should be having at this point in the season as well.
Yeah, he does not look comfortable back there at all. It honestly just feels like whenever I'm watching the Bills game that he has to really run around in the backfield a lot. And it sucks because he was my preseason NFL MVP pick, but if you do not get the time to throw, then you're not really going to get that award. It's very difficult to put up great stats consistently whenever there's just pressure by the 6-man box that the Bucs brought or all the blitzes that they send in their complicated defenses. So they need to address that in the offseason. And it's similar to what the Giants have. If they fix their offensive line, there will be a lot of good things that will happen in the future, but they need to fix that. That's a key part of any offense. You can have the best receivers, running backs, QBs, tight ends, but you don't have protection. How far can you go?
Yeah, of course, someone left a comment talking about how perhaps their criticism of Daniel Jones is too strong, and that the issues go back to the Giants' offensive line. But surely it's an interesting take, and perhaps I think there is truth to that. But even then, you look at someone like an Andrew Luck, historically, who was able to engineer wins with a terrible offensive line. And I feel like there are some similarities between an Andrew Luck and a Josh Allen right now, because Luck was really having to really push his team through, and I think Allen, to an extent, is having to do the same thing, although the talent that surrounds Allen right now is better than what Luck had.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right, but Oscar, I know you want to talk about one of the most historic rivalries in all the NFL.
I don't know why I call it a robbery, but it was definitely a shutout. It was a dominant win. I think Aaron Rodgers definitely came in. I think
Dominant win?
What are we talking about?
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, the Bears were up at halftime.
They were, and I think I got a little nervous about that, but I think he came in, he got the job done. It kind of showed the Bears were a little bit in over their heads, especially with Justin Fields. I think he did really well as a showing, kind of like young quarterback trying to show off what he had and be effective. He was effective on the ground. He did what he could in the air. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers came out here. He dominated. He did his thing in the second half, and he got the Packers a win. And he showed everybody what he can do. It's vintage Aaron Rodgers. The guy could do it in the air. He can do it on the ground. He can trick the defense to do what he needs them to do so he can get the yards if it's not in a play. He has that little gimmick where he calls a hard count and people jump. And he definitely used that to his advantage. Definitely got to see what a wily veteran could do when he's up against the wall. I think it was fun to watch.
He also the Packers covered because I think the money line was minus 12.5 for them to win. So
yeah,
it must have been nervous for a lot of sports bettors and gamblers to watch that game. But I think Justin Fields does have a bright future in Chicago. But the Packers, another week where I think they're going to make the Super Bowl. It's just unbelievable what Rodgers does week in and week out. Your two best offensive linemen are out for the season, and A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones still run over other teams. It doesn't make any sense, but it works. There's just so much talent on the offense, and the defense steps up too, and they make big plays. So another team that I think is going to represent, and another reason why the Packers are going to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl and possibly win this thing.
I mean, think about this. You take out the Saints game week 1. You take out the Seahawks game a couple weeks ago. Aaron Rodgers has 27 touchdowns and only 1 interception. And his other starts on the season, of course, he missed that Chiefs game because of the whole COVID situation that happened off the field. But he is doing his efficiency right now is off the chart, and he's throwing the ball downfield. It isn't like Tom Brady where he's sneaking and dunking. I mean, there's some of that with the Packers, but Rodgers still can make insane throws that other quarterbacks, very few others can make outside of like a Mahomes or a Herbert. And it's just really interesting that he's not getting any MVP talk. And I do think a lot of that is some of the other stuff that perhaps have turned people off. And of course, he's the defending MVP winner. So there's a hesitancy to give a repeat MVP winner that. But I mean, where would the Packers be without Aaron Rodgers? I mean, that's just the question here. We saw what they looked like with Jordan Love against Kansas City, and it was terrible. Like, Aaron Rodgers is what makes this team go. And, I don't think he's necessarily going to get the MVP, but, one moment in that game that really is interesting is that when Robert Quinn decided to taunt him, and then he basically played lights out from then on out. It's just really interesting to see how Aaron Rodgers responds to situations like that and how it affects his play on the field, because I think he's a guy who takes pettiness and uses it to fuel him. And because I've been saying all year, I feel like losing to Brady in the way he did, to have Brady come over to his conference, to be him on his home field, that has to be something that tears him up inside and pushes him. Because I just feel like inevitably we're heading back to a rematch of the NFC title game.
He found his good luck charm in the crowd with somebody that looked exactly like him. And I'm going to say this right now. I've never seen a more dominant team at home than the Green Bay Packers. At home, it's like they're always going to win no matter who they play. I know they lost to the Bucs, but if it's at Green Bay and at home and the weather's not good, it's snowing, I have to take Green Bay all the way.
I saw that in Week 16 last year with the Titans. Sunday Night Football, our first Sunday Night Football game in like 5 years or something, get demolished in the snowy Lambeau field. Just we weren't ready for that. Connor, what are your thoughts on the Packers, where they stand right now?
I mean, obviously Aaron Rodgers is the GOAT. Probably the most talented quarterback besides Patrick Mahomes in this entire league. The stuff that he can do with his arm, like just shifting his body around, throwing the ball to Devontae Adams, to Randall Cobb, to all his offensive weapons with pinpoint accuracy on a needle. That stuff's crazy. Like, you don't really see that too often from many quarterbacks in this league. Like, he's special. Like, him and Devontae Adams connection is like crazy too. I think like his touchdown throw in that game last night, on Sunday night, where he like broke the record for most touchdown passes by a Packers quarterback. That was like him playing backyard football. Like, he just met with Devontae Adams like on the field. He like drew something up in the dirt, like made it up on the spot. Like him and Mahomes like are probably the best quarterbacks in this entire league. I think he should be MVP, despite all the offseason drama, despite, the whole vaccination immunized thing or whatever. Like, he's had the best season of any quarterback in this league for, so far 2 straight seasons. And I mean, it'll probably go to Tom Brady because of, his statistics as well as his team record. But I think Aaron Rodgers right now is the best quarterback in the NFL. To talk about the Bears, though, like, I honestly expected them to be absolutely blown out. I wouldn't have been surprised if they only scored like a field goal or two, or maybe were even shut out, considering how well this Packers defense has really picked up steam over these past couple months and have started playing pretty damn good football. But Justin Fields is a dog, man. Like, he's mobile. He can make plays on the ground, and he can throw the ball pretty well too. Like, I think I was saying this in our group chat a couple of days ago. He might already be the best Bears quarterback ever, which isn't too hard to do, honestly. But like, he's doing pretty well, even with his coaching staff, kind of being broken offensively. I really hope that there's a good coaching staff that comes in next season that can really coach up Justin Fields and help him unlock his potential at the NFL level. And I think he could be a really great quarterback in this league.
It would be interesting to watch to see how they move forward because Matt Nagy, he's pretty obviously going to get fired. It's a toxic situation right now in Chicago. I think they got to go out and get another offensive guy to me when you have a young player like Justin Fields because I think that defense in Chicago is always going to look decent. But, let's have to wait and see what happens with Chicago. And now, finally, my takeaway from this Week 14, I'm worried about Trevor Lawrence. Titans fan watched him this week. He looked awful. He threw 4 interceptions in this game. He was just getting absolutely battered because his offensive line is terrible. And just the talent around him is being severely misused. James Robinson, a guy that had over 1,000 yards last year, only got 6 carries in this game for 4 yards. Urban Meyer has lost complete control of this team. I mean, just look at the way he acts like a little baby after the game. After the way he was trying to the way he just kind of shrugged off Mike Vrabel's handshake was really, really weird. And obviously, with all the reports this week about him challenging his assistants one by one in front of the entire team to justify why they should be on the team. And he's just trying to employ these college tactics that don't work at the NFL level. It's really, I don't know if I've ever seen such a dumpster fire in the NFL as much as these Urban Meyer Jaguars are. And it makes you wonder how in the world this team has managed to win 2 games. I mean, what's going on? Is Trevor Lawrence really about to be a bust? Because I still think he has physical tools. I still think he has a good arm. But he's going to need something to change fast.
He's average at best. The only place I honestly see him going is if Russell Wilson leaves the Seahawks. He could maybe be a fit in that offense, but he's just going to be an average quarterback in the league. That's just how I feel.
I think a lot of us overhyped Trevor Lawrence coming out of college. I mean, to me, he kind of seems more like a Carson Palmer type quarterback where like he's got physical attributes and he can win you a lot of games. I mean, thinking about Trevor Lawrence's situation, I think like ever since even high school, like he's always been in the perfect situation, top tier receivers, great run game, great defense. And then when you stick him in this situation, in Jacksonville, arguably one of the worst teams in the entire league, only a couple really good players, and obviously a terrible coach also, who's completely lost that locker room. I think like in week 4 or week 5, he lost that locker room, honestly, like after he went on that jet plane or
yeah,
actually, no, he
fact
didn't go
that
on the
he
plane.
wasn't traveling home with the team after losses is just insane.
Yeah, and just like all the leaks that have come out of this organization, especially this past weekend, he's lost the coaching staff as well. Some of them are already quit. Other ones are actively seeking jobs. He'll probably like try to fire some more coaching staff that he has currently after the season, if not during the season. But at the same time, like I seriously think that Shad Khan in this Jaguars organization should move on from Urban Meyer after this year, if not before the season ends. It's like he's proven that he can't do it at the NFL level. He's treating players that are like, in their 30s, have kids, have wife, like they're 19-year-old college kids that are like, sophomores in college. This isn't Ohio State. This isn't Florida. Or I mean, it is Florida, but it isn't like you're coaching for the Florida Gators. Like this is the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is an NFL franchise. You can't treat these players like children, and you can't consistently disrespect both the players and your coaching staff because inevitably it's just going to become a, toxic team. And you can't have that in this league and be able to win games.
I think it's unfair to the team. It's unfair to Lawrence whenever you draft a guy so high and you have high expectations of him, and now he just looks average at best. Get a new coaching staff. Get some receivers in there. Use James Robinson more. I talked about this in my group chat. Somebody I picked up in week 2 of last season on the waiver wire. I was lucky to get him in free agency, and then he gets 1,000 yards as an undrafted rookie, and now this year they barely even use him at all. Like, what is really happening with this organization? Really?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it does go back to the owner, because the owner, Shad Khan, is still saying that he has complete faith in Urban Meyer. I can't believe that he's actually telling the truth here. I think he has to be honest with himself, honest with his franchise, that he has to make a change, because otherwise you're going to be a doormat. I mean, the Texans were supposed to be by far the worst team in your division this year. And you might legitimately finish behind them and finish dead last. And you've got a generational talent, at least allegedly, although I think the points about him being in a winning situation all the way back to high school is correct. I think he only lost like 3 games before he reached the NFL. It was just unbelievable what he had been in. Of course,
Did he lose at all? I don't know if he lost at all, to be honest. I think that
he lost to LSU in the national title game.
Right.
So he lost to Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and all those guys. But outside of that, obviously never really lost a conference game. Last year, the one game that Clemson did lose in the regular season was DJ Ujalele playing, not him. Whereas they lost to who was it? Ohio State. They lost to Ohio State. So he lost 2 times in college. They lost to LSU in the national title game. They lost to Justin Fields in Ohio State last year. But outside of those 2 times, Clemson was clearly the better team in virtually every single game they played. Jacksonville's not that, and he's just showing right now he can't elevate himself. And kind of to bring back an Andrew Luck comparison, we were a group of friends and I were talking about Andrew Luck earlier, so he's kind of on my mind today. You know how many game-winning drives Andrew Luck had his rookie year? 7. He led 7 game-winning drives en route to leaving the Colts into the playoffs. And Andrew Luck, honestly, with that first team, did not have a ton of talent around him. He had a terrible offensive line. His defense wasn't very good. But he still managed to get the Colts into the playoffs. You either got it or you don't. And to me, I don't think Lawrence has it. And if you put him in New England, is he a lot better? Probably. But when you're a generational talent like that and you go to the number one, you have to prove yourself. And I just don't think Trevor Lawrence is able to do that right now. Fair or unfair, it's just a standard, especially after, I believe Connor said this earlier, Herbert and Mahomes, unfairly or not, have changed how young quarterbacks are judged, because you're expected to play well immediately. There's no longer this time to develop. And it's going to be, if you don't see a massive improvement next year, then you might have talked about replacing them already.
Right. Well, with Trevor Lawrence, I don't know that he's like a bust necessarily per se. I think there's I guess you can make a lot of excuses for him, or a lot of excuses for the Jaguars in general for them not having success that they should, or we all expect them to have. Like, they did have injuries early in the year. Like, let's walk away a little bit from Urban Meyer and his dysfunction, and how that probably even affects like game communication, game time, real time communication during games, and how you want to change. But they lost Travis Etienne. Let's not forget James Robinson, like Leon said, was an undrafted free agent who just blew up last year. Didn't seem like the Jaguars even really believed in him to be that guy this year. They went out, they got a rookie. That rookie got hurt. James Robinson is there. They got a coach that thinks that the backup for that guy is better, and Carlos Hyde. They lost DJ Chark. So they're surviving off the likes of Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault, who weren't necessarily going to be the top offensive pieces for this year. So I hope that they do get better next year. They do get better pieces. Remember, Trevor Lawrence was like a first-round pick. When you're a first-round pick and you're the quarterback, usually that says a lot about the offense. They need to rebuild, and if they don't have the pieces there for you, then chances are you're gonna have to sit around and just wade in the water until they have other pieces there for you, and you can actually figure out how to have a successful offense, because they don't have those pieces yet. Like, we can't say like the Jaguars right now, their offensive pieces are the pieces that were going to get them into the playoffs, because that wasn't the case in the beginning of the year. Those weren't the pieces that are there. So hopefully they do get better. Hopefully they get rid of this. Like you said, Todd Chang is not making good decision by keeping Urban Meyer there, and changes it because it sounds like he's not being a professional. He's not treating his coworkers or his players like professionals, and that's what you do in professional sports. Maybe in college you could talk about you're not going to get scholarship next year. You could talk about you're not going to be the first string guy, or I'm not going to play you anymore. But in the big leagues, in the NFL, like you're getting paid to play. People are giving you the pieces. You know the value of the player that's being given. That's almost how much playing time that person's going to garner. So when you're not able to respect that, then you're not even respecting the decisions of the GM. You're not respecting the decisions of the coaches. You're taking it upon yourself. And when you do that, failure is going to be your fault. Like if you listen to your team, if you listen to your coaches, and you fail, it's a group effort. When you say you're the best guy in the locker room compared to everybody, because that's what it sounds like. It sounds like I think there's an article I read that he was going coach by coach, trying to point out how they were losers and he was winners because of his resume. And in pro sports, it's not about that. It's what have you done lately? We've talked in the last couple of weeks how we're going to get rid of the Seattle Seahawks head coach just because, hey, you know what? He's a little old. He's a little washed up. He had a bad season. It's time to walk away from this guy. So Urban Meyer is exactly at risk of that happening to him in his first year in the league, just because it shows that he can't be a professional. He doesn't know how to work and be a functional boss for them. But I think Trevor Lawrence, if they give him a chance, if they keep giving him pieces, he probably won't be as good as Andrew Luck. But he can have some success in this league if he has better pieces around him, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I think that was a lot of great points about Urban Meyer, and it shows how a lot of college coaches don't translate well. I mean, think about Nick Saban, probably the college GOAT. Didn't do great at Miami. I mean, now it wasn't this type of disaster. They were a mediocre team, but they still weren't great. So very few, like Barry Switzer and Jimmy Johnson, are like the two that come. All right, and then like Pete Carroll, are like the three that come off the top of my head that were great in both college and NFL. I guess John Harbaugh too. Jim Harbaugh, I mean, both with the 49ers and now with Michigan, did well at both. But it takes a certain type of guy who's able to know how to manage two different types of groups, because it is two different types of groups. You know, college kids, yes, they're fighting for their opportunity because they know this is their make or break 3 to 4 years to get from college to the NFL. NFL, they've already made it. Now they're just looking for job security. And it's just a whole different dynamic. And Urban Meyer clearly hasn't learned that, which in a way it's disappointing because I've always thought he was a very intelligent football mind, not necessarily a great person off the field because of some of the stunts he's pulled in the past. Obviously, some of there's questions over whether or not some of the reasons he left were legitimate, and obviously his conduct off the field in terms of some of the players he was recruiting and all that stuff. It never has really painted him in a good light, and a lot of people have basically equated Urban Meyer to being a sleazebag. And, you know, I think we're seeing his true colors be truly unveiled here in Jacksonville.
I think there's one player that we forgot to discuss who was lost to injury in Jacksonville, who we haven't thought about, another first rounder, Travis Etienne. And I'm really thinking, how much of a difference could he have made this season at all? Could they have used him in the screen game? He plays this like receiver, running back hybrid type of role, but he's not with them also. And it's painful to watch this team. I know in the Northeast, we don't really get much chances to watch him, maybe if it's against the Jets, but like they can't even convert a first down.
Yeah. I mean, and that's crazy too, because Titans have had issues getting teams off the field on third down. I mean, it's a lot better this year than it was last year, but the Jaguars just had no chance against our front four. So, and I still don't even think it was a great performance by Tennessee in that game. You know, the
Lucky
offense,
matchup, lucky scheduling. That's what that game was, to be honest, for the Titans.
oh yeah, but it definitely needed a game like that just to get the confidence back. We finally had Julio back at least, so that at least gave the offense some juice, but they still aren't able to consistently convert. And you know, but I don't think we're going to have much. I mean, we're going to have, I believe, Bud Dupree back for Sunday in Pittsburgh, and I forget someone else in the secondary. I can't remember, but so I think our defense should be back to nearly 100% for Pittsburgh this week, which is certainly good because the Steelers' offense is come and go. But without Derrick Henry, I still don't think the ceiling is very high. But reports are suggesting he might be back. He should be ready in time for the playoffs. So, we don't do the Yinzer voice in Titans, but Titans to the Super Bowl, as your injury would say. But anyway, speaking of the Steelers, we're going to transition to the NFL key stories of the week with Leon. What about that really just weird Thursday night game?
So during the halftime of the Vikings versus Steelers game, I decided to go for a walk, and whenever I came back, the Steelers scored 20-something points. 28 points scored in the second half, but the Vikings win 36-28. Dalvin Cook, 205 yards, 2 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson making history in the record book. But I think where the Vikings messed up is that they didn't run the ball much in the second half, and I do believe that Dalvin Cook could have broken Adrian Peterson's 296-yard record. But a win's a win, but I don't believe that the Vikings will make the NFC playoffs based on how even the Steelers were able to come back against them. I don't see it, to be honest. I would honestly choose the Falcons over them. So, Connor, what are your thoughts on this Viking squad?
Yeah, the Vikings really Vikinged it up, the second half. If I were to describe their defensive performance, I think we all know that this Vikings offense is great. Kirk Cousins, I think a lot of people hate on him. I think partly because of his contract, also because Kirk Cousins teams are usually hovering around 500, and don't really make all that much noise. But he's a really efficient quarterback, top 15 at least, if not top 10. I think he's only thrown 3 picks, which is crazy, especially considering how off and on a lot of the quarterbacks in this league have been. He's probably the most consistent one this season, at least. And his weapons are great too. He's got Dalvin Cook in the backfield, an elite running back for sure. Justin Jefferson, elite wide receiver. Adam Thielen is a guy as well. Their offensive line isn't amazing, but that might be the only real hole within that Vikings offense. But their defense is absolute trash. Seriously, you're letting a half-dead Ben Roethlisberger with an offensive line that is mediocre in I don't know, Chase Claypool. They all look like Super Bowl winning teams, playing this Vikings defense. That was terrible. They almost choked that game away. And another thing about Kirk Cousins' teams, his defenses usually suck too. Mike Zimmer's got to go after this Vikings game, or after this Vikings season, rather. He hasn't really shown that much progress ever since he came to Minnesota. And they really got to invest in their defense also. Kirk Cousins isn't the problem. Their offense isn't really the problem. It's their defense blowing leads.
I definitely agree with that. I said that last week. If the Lions lost, Mike Zimmer should still be fired. This win doesn't change that. And really, if the Vikings are going to have any shot, it's just going to be Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, and Justin Jefferson bailing them out. They got to be Mighty Mouse. They got to be here to save the day. And you look at the rest of their schedule, it's not easy, right? So they go to Chicago, who had a pulse this week. So you can't take that game for granted if you're Minnesota, considering you just lost to Detroit. Then your 2 games after that, you have the Rams and the Packers. Very difficult games. I don't know if they're going to win either one of those. If you're going to make the playoffs, I think you got to win at least one of those, and then beat the Bears again in Week 18. So you got to win 3 out of 4. Does anyone really trust the Vikings to win 3 out of 4? I don't.
I don't trust them to win. I honestly see the Bears beating them, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that they're going to split with the Bears. I think they'll go 1-1. I think they're going to go 1-3 here, which is going to leave them at 7-10 and not close, I think, to the playoffs. I think they'll be 2 games behind. Also, because you're probably going to need at least 9-8, a 9-8 record, maybe 8-9 to get in, considering they are the first team looking out right now. But they're going to have to outscore some teams, and I don't think it's going to be very likely that this team makes it in.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree with Nick. I think the Vikings, even though they have a pretty good offense and they can dominate some teams, their defense hasn't given them any option but to be aggressive and dominate on the offensive side. I mean, just looking at the last 8 games that they've played, no opponent has scored less than 20 points on the Vikings. You know, they haven't been able to really stop anybody. So yeah, and their opponents coming in the future. I mean, Rams definitely they're gonna blow them out of the water. Packers there's gonna be, I mean, it might be a beatdown, but the Bears might be the closest matches, and none of us are confident that they can actually beat them, especially with Justin Fields now in the game, and them and the Bears finding new pieces. I think they got Hakeem Grant now, their punt returner, who they got. I forget what team they traded for to get him, but or they got him.
The Dolphins.
What was that? The Dolphins.
He was on the Dolphins last season, yeah.
Yeah, so they got all these new guys that they can step up and they can do some good stuff, and they might surprise the Vikings if the Vikings aren't ready for them. So I think I'm with you. I think they're too far out to be competitive with the opponents that they have left.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see what the Vikings do here. And then on the Steelers, I mean, they're also on the outside looking at right now. They got a big game with my Titans this week. Do we feel like they have a shot at the playoffs either, or do we just think from an offensive standpoint they're just too deficient, especially with Big Ben at quarterback?
Yeah, rebuild here.
I mean, like, they can always stay around 500. I mean, it wouldn't be a shocker to me if they were to beat the Titans next week, but
not to me either.
But who knows? I mean, Tennessee just looks average without Derrick Henry, and they're just lucky that the injury happened later and that it wasn't the beginning of the season.
Yeah, we're fortunate it didn't happen during that stretch where we had the Bills and the Chiefs back to back, and we had to go to the Rams. Well, we did play the Rams without Derrick Henry, but we're fortunate it didn't happen then, because otherwise we wouldn't have the cushion that we do now. Because, just briefly on the Titans, if the Colts lose to the Patriots, which is very possible, the Patriots are playing extremely well right now, and the Titans beat the Steelers, the Titans win the AFC South. So, definitely him waiting until after the Colts to get hurt. And I know you don't just wait to get hurt, but just the timing of it, definitely we're very fortunate it didn't happen earlier in the year. But as I said earlier, early January, there's a good chance he's going to be back, and which will help the Titans out immensely. We also need A.J. Brown back as well to help really get the passing game going again, because Ryan Tannehill is pretty average without Derrick Henry and any of his receivers. And really, that's not your fault, because you are playing with a bunch of practice squad guys, but I don't think he's really elevating the players around him. But Leon, what's the next story you want to get into?
Another team in the similar position as the Minnesota Vikings are the San Francisco 49ers. Now, the 49ers are the 6th seed in the NFC, or the 7th seed. I'm not sure on that. But they win an overtime.
They're the 6th
seed. They win an overtime thriller against the Cincinnati Bengals after the Bengals came back in the second half. Bengals scored a field goal in overtime, but Brandon Ayuk gets a 12-yard score. Deebo Samuel's playing running back 1 and wide receiver 1, apparently, and George Kittle 2 straight games of over 150 yards receiving. I'm a Jimmy G fan. I usually root for the 49ers when I'm not rooting for the Giants. I don't know why, but I do. But where do we see actually, forget about the 49ers. Where do the Bengals even make the playoffs? Oscar, we'll start with you.
I think you're muted, Oscar.
Hey, sorry guys. I don't know. I think they're a little bit far out. Looking at their schedule coming up, they got the Ravens, the Broncos, the Chiefs, and the Browns. They might get 2 of those. Positively looking, if you look at that, they might be able to beat the Ravens, especially if Lamar Jackson's still hurt. The Browns possibly. I think the Broncos their defense might give them a little bit of trouble, but I think the Bengals might be a little. They're not gonna make it. I don't think they don't have they don't have the defense, the dominating defense to beat those teams and be competitive in their division. So, yeah.
I'll say this: I think they beat the Broncos on the road. Ravens, it depends on how long Lamar Jackson's going to be out.
Right.
Lamar Jackson's back for that game. You know, it's 50-50, right? Because the Bengals went to Baltimore and absolutely ran them out of the stadium. But I don't think they're going to do that twice to a Lamar Jackson-led Ravens team. Now, if it's Tyler Huntley leaving the Ravens, who knows, right? I think the game's more in the air. You can win that. The Chiefs right now are playing way better. I think the Chiefs will beat the Bengals. And then the Browns, the Browns have been very suspect this year too. Like, they can go 3-1 down the stretch here, which put them at 10-7. That may not be good enough with how tight this race is, but I think the chance is there. But I do think realistically they'll go 2-2, which puts them at 9-8, which is probably not enough to make it in.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, like, out of all the like confusing kind of things about the AFC this year, I think the AFC North is the most confusing. I mean, at first Baltimore was looking like the team to beat, but now Lamar's like not really been playing all that well this past month. I mean, ever since that Miami game, I mean, obviously he's still a threat on the ground, but if you blitz him enough and you limit him to the pocket, he'll force throws and he'll look like a rookie. Down there. I mean, like in that first Cleveland game, he threw like 4 interceptions. I just really don't know what to make of this Baltimore team. I mean, they're probably in the playoffs, but part of me isn't even sure that they'll win the AFC North. I think they probably will. But I think the Bengals, they're pretty inconsistent right now. But when they do put everything together, put 2 and 2 together, their defense, I think their pass rush has improved from last year quite a bit. I think their secondary's not too bad too. Obviously, Jesse Bates is an absolute stud at the safety position. And their offense has improved too. Their O-line's a bit better than last year, definitely. Joe Burrow has made a leap from year 1 to year 2, and their wide receiver core is great. And they also have one of the best running backs in the league in Joe Mixon. When they do put 2 and 2 together, they could be the team to beat in the AFC North, but I don't really trust them that much. And then with Cleveland, like, I mean, Baker's been somewhat inconsistent this year as well. There's been a lot of things about his future in Cleveland put into question this season. OBJ left, and now he's absolutely killing it with the Rams. There's a lot of questions surrounding this Cleveland team, and I think it's very likely that they could miss the playoffs. I mean, that performance at their home stadium, playing Baltimore last week, as well as a couple other weeks ago, in Baltimore playing the Ravens, like, they looked really great. But then there's been other games where they haven't looked as great. I mean, look at that Steelers game where they lost 15-10. I can't really trust, I think, any team in that division.
Yeah, I agree, but like, you're talking about the Steelers. I mean, it's scary, but they could actually sneak in and be the AFC North champs. I mean, they play the Titans next week, which I think they will win. The Chiefs, they will lose to. But then they play the Browns, who they've beaten already, and the Ravens, who they've already beaten. So the one team that can beat the Steelers, has proven it, is the Bengals, which they've done twice. But since it is Roethlisberger's last year, you might want to try maybe a rally call, and it'll be something special where they could at least make the wild card. But I don't see them making it far in the playoffs. It's just weird because it's so close. Like, the AFC is just a mess. Like, I've never seen this before as an NFL fan, and it makes it interesting. But besides the Patriots, who's that second team, to be honest?
I'd say that's probably the Titans. I mean, probably not right now, but I think, from what I've heard about Derrick Henry, in terms of his injury status, I think he could potentially be back, within that really important playoff stretch, perhaps the last week or 2 of the regular season. And Derrick Henry is the most important part of that Titans offense, without a doubt. his presence will not only help the run game, of course, but it will also help the pass game. Ryan Tannehill. I was talking about this with Nick a couple of days ago. Like Ryan Tannehill is not the same quarterback without Derrick Henry. You really cannot, put the entire load of this offense onto Ryan Tannehill. I don't really trust him himself to lead the team to victory. As we saw, I think like at some point, one of the games after Derrick Henry was out with an injury, Tannehill threw like 4 interceptions in one game. I forget which one it was, but that's just one of the examples where it really shows how Ryan Tannehill isn't really an elite quarterback. I mean, of course, Julio Jones, I don't think was in that game, but like still, you should at least like not play that bad. But that's who Ryan Tannehill is. He like really relies on a lot of play action. So as long as Derrick Henry is there, I think the Titans are at least like the number 2 team in the AFC.
I definitely agree with that. I think with how wide open things are, I think with Derrick Henry, I think the AFC is a free horse race between the Patriots, the Titans, and the Chiefs. Of course, I have the Titans dominate the Chiefs. I don't think they would do that again because they're playing way better now. So it's very interesting to think about what's going to happen. I still think the Colts, the way they're playing right now, especially with Jonathan Taylor, that's a scary team to me. And then the Chargers, they're just so off and on. If they're on for 2 weeks in the AFC playoffs, they can make it all the way to the AFC title game. So there's just, I think, a lot of interesting storylines to think about in the AFC. But moving back over to NFC for the final key story, I know you want to highlight a particular defensive rookie that is really starting to get some buzz.
Yeah, number 11 on the Cowboys, Micah Parsons, is closing in on Javon Curse's rookie 14.5 sack record. Now, Parsons has had 6 sacks in the last, well, not 6 sacks. In the last 6 games, he has had at least 1 sack or over that. But I think the Aaron Donald era of him being the best player in the league is coming to the end on defense. And now we're moving over to the Micah Parsons era. Do we think that Micah Parsons has a chance to really win Defensive Player of the Year? Or do we think it'll be TJ Watt or like Trayvon Diggs? Maybe Xavier Howard could be in there. But do we really feel that someone like Micah Parsons could win Rookie Defensive Player of the Year and the league's Defensive Player of the Year? So we'll start with you, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously incredible what he's done this year as a freshman because, a lot of people really wanted Dallas to take a corner, like get Patrick Surtain there, but for them to be forced to take Micah Parsons has actually turned out to be a unfortunate stroke of luck for them. And there's no denying that Parsons has been fantastic. I still think that TJ Watt, like a Myles Garrett, I mean, he's, is going to win this award just because I think those guys have been more established. And you really have to do something special as a rookie to win an overall player of the year. And it's not like, and obviously 12 sacks is, impressive, but we do have to remember too that Parsons is getting a whole extra game to break that record. So we do have to take records, I think, with a grain of salt over the next couple of years because we're going to see a lot of them be broken. So I don't necessarily think Parsons is going to win it all, but he's certainly going to be a massive X factor for the Cowboys in their run down the stretch here. I mean, they're obviously going to win the NFC East. They're kind of the team that's left out because everyone's been thinking about the Packers, the Cardinals, and the Buccaneers. But no one's really been thinking about the Cowboys and if they're a serious contender or not. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really think they are. I mean, they have the talent to be. I don't feel like they play consistently well enough from week to week in order for me to trust them in the NFC playoffs. But hey, Michael Parsons really could be an X factor in helping them get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a lock for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think there's like absolutely no question at this point. I mean, I don't know any defensive rookie that is nearly as dominant as Micah Parsons is. But when you're talking about Defensive Player of the Year, I don't see a rookie winning that. I mean, especially with stiff competition from both TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. They've been absolutely killing it, as well as Matthew Judon. I think he's a dark horse candidate. He's been doing pretty well in New England this season. But yeah, I think Micah Parsons could really anchor this Cowboys defense for years to come.
Yeah, Oscar, did you have any comments on Micah Parsons?
I think I agree with a lot of you guys. I don't think that he wins Defensive Player of the Year. I think he definitely gets Rookie Player of the Year, just because he is having a fantastic season. But there are other players that are having just as good, if not more better seasons. Like Myles Garrett is scoring touchdowns as well as getting sacks. T.J. Watt as well with the Steelers. He's having a great season as well, and his own teammates are also helping promote them. So I think Micah Parsons is having a great season, and all props to him. And I hope he gets a lot of success. So don't know that he's right now, presently this week, the front runner for that award just yet.
I do think he is the next era. Like the Micah Parsons era is coming up. We had the Aaron Donald era, and he's still going to be great. But now it's Micah Parsons' chance to be the best defensive player in the league, in my opinion, for maybe a decade.
And just to think, like, they probably would have drafted Pat Surtain II if he was still there at when they were drafting. I think the only reason why they traded with the Eagles was like partly because the New York Giants was going to probably draft a wide receiver, but also because Pat Surtain II wasn't there. They felt like they needed help at corner at the time. So just imagine Micah Parsons could potentially not be a Cowboy. He could be he could be a Bronco. He could be on another team in the NFC East. So it's just crazy to see how like the NFL draft, like there's so many dominoes that fall that cause players to go to their respective teams.
It's very interesting because if they got Surtain, they probably would have still had Jalen Smith. And I still think the defense would have been good, but Parsons compared to Smith looks like no comparison at this point. Parsons' sack on Taylor Heineke. Heineke got absolutely destroyed on that play. I've never seen anything like that in a long time. So he's a game changer right there.
Yeah, he definitely is a great talent. I've been watching him since Penn State. He was a great talent back then, and he's certainly proving his worth now in the NFL. But with that, that's the end of our key story segment. Now I'm going to turn over to Oscar for both his injury report and his fantasy football report. Oscar, give us all the information we need to know because it's fantasy playoff season. We need to know who's injured, who's hurt, and who is playing their best football heading to the most critical time of the year.
All right, let's go. We're going to start off with the Washington football team. Terry McLaurin, he had a concussion protocol. This might mean he misses next week because of the protocol. We'll see. With the Ravens, we obviously talked a little bit about Lamar Jackson getting an ankle sprain. This could mean he misses a week. Reports coming out of the Ravens camp is that he will be week to week, so he might play next week. He might not. Hopefully he does because he is the best offensive weapon they have. With the Panthers, it seemed like DJ Moore in the game this Sunday, he kind of got hurt in his knee, but there was he might be able. It doesn't seem like he's going to miss very much time from the reports that I saw. Chargers, Austin Eckler, ankle sprain as well. He might miss 1 or 2 weeks. We have to keep an eye on reports coming out of that for next Sunday. And with the Bills, Josh Allen, there were reports that he came out with a walking boot. Sorry, Connor. He seems to have a foot sprain, but he'll be day-to-day. They haven't ruled him out for next week, for week 15. So we'll keep an eye on it. As what do you got? You got an inside scoop? Let's go.
I got an update.
Here you go.
So yesterday, for some of y'all that might have seen his press conference or like a couple pictures of him, y'all might have seen him in a walking boot. Tonight, he was watching Hamilton in downtown Buffalo, and he is not in a walking boot anymore. So, a good sign for the QB1 for the Buffalo Bills.
Bonus points for being well cultured as well.
Right.
We are delaying the Mitchell Trubisky era.
That's good. Well, thank you, Connor. Appreciate that. And we're going to go over our top performers for this week. A lot of QBs in here. We got Josh Allen. Even though he seems to have gotten his foot sprain, he actually is on top of our list as a top scorer in standard scoring. 36 passes, 309 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 12 rushes for 109 yards, and another touchdown. So Josh Allen was hot this week. Unfortunately, he didn't get the win. Dalvin Cook, 27 rushes, 205 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tom Brady leading the Bucs, 31 passes for 364 yards, 2 touchdowns. In this game, he actually got some work done on the ground, 7 rushes for 60 yards and 1 touchdown on the ground. I don't know if you guys got to see the clip where he's kind of ragging on Peyton Manning for making fun of him not really being a running quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, he does pretty good. 29 passes, 341 yards, and 4 touchdowns, leading the Packers to their win this week. And Taysom Hill, guy gets success. Unfortunately, doesn't help the Saints very much. 15 passes, 175 yards, 11 rushes for 73 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Good outing for him. Just didn't help out the Saints too much. Those are our top 5 performers. We had a couple of surprise performances here with Rashad Penny. I don't know if you guys have heard of Rashad Penny before. I've actually been following him since his rookie year with the Seahawks. He hasn't done very much. He's been often injured. He started off the season on the injured list, but he actually got to play this weekend. He had 16 rushes for 137 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's good to see. The coach actually came out and said that he might actually be in line for top running back work this week, so keep an eye out for him. Melvin Gordon finally got to break out, coming back from injury. 24 rushes for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's kind of been a running back by committee with Javonte Williams, and here he got to shine. Javonte Williams still did really well. Melvin Gordon just did. He was kind of following the hype. And Hakeem Grant, we talked about him a little bit coming out of the Dolphins and now playing with damn, why didn't I write that down? And he got 1 catch, 46 yards, 1 touchdown. And the greatest play that he had for that night was a return touchdown. I think it was 93 yards to score with special teams. So those 3 did great. Those are 3 surprise performances.
Yeah. So down for there, obviously, for a lot of people, this is their first week of fantasy football. The decisions they make today and tomorrow could make or break their entire season. If you are in desperate need for a waiver wire pick, who would you tell them to go get, Oscar?
Well, I already talked about Rashad Penny. So if you don't believe in Alex Collins, we know Chris Carson is going to come back in time necessarily to make a difference. So if you don't think Alex Collins is going to do it, Travis Homer's not going to do it. You want Rashad Penny. This is a guy who's projected to do big things coming out of college and from the draft. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy, and that's kind of been the mantra. If he's healthy, he could do well, and he's finally healthy. So if he's still in your waiver wire, go get him. Rashad Bateman, this might depend a little bit more on whether Lamar Jackson is available next week or not, but he did get 7 catches, 103 yards this week, so he can be successful within that Ravens offense. And KJ Osborne, this has to do a little bit because of Adam Thielen getting hurt last week and not being able to do very much, but KJ Osborne would be the wide receiver to step up and do really well. And with Logan Thomas hurt, Ricky Seals-Jones, tight end for Washington football team, he would also be a good pickup. When Logan Thomas was hurt earlier in the season, Ricky Seals-Jones was actually a good fill-in 1-for-1. He filled in the void that Logan Thomas left behind. He did really well for his fantasy managers during that period. So those would be a couple guys that I would recommend to go get for this week.
Yeah, and definitely my fantasy waiver wire suggestion of the week. If Lamar Jackson is out, Tyler Huntley, if you are in need of a quarterback desperately, or if you are in a 2 QB league, he may not be a bad idea. I mean, he threw 27 and 38 for 270 and a touchdown this past week. Pass rank of 99.7, completion percentage of 71. He also ran for 45 yards. Now, he did have 2 fumbles, which is certainly something you have to consider. But considering they're still going to run the ball a ton, and he's going to be a part of that rushing attack, that's something that could have a lot of upside. So, definitely pay attention to the news, but maybe Tyler Huntley is someone you should stash for the duration of this playoffs, especially in 2 quarterback leagues. So we're looking at both fantasy and injury from both a fantasy perspective and just from a real football team perspective. What do we think are the most important? What is the most important injury / performance trends that we're seeing right now?
Well, if Lamar Jackson is out, then they're one and done in the playoffs, it looks like. So that's all I really have to say for that.
Do they even make the playoffs? So Tyler Huntley has to start the rest of the year? Because I'm not. I don't believe so, in my personal opinion.
Personally, I think that Tyler Huntley like fit pretty well in that Baltimore offense. The couple games they had to step up. From what I've seen from him, I mean, there's a reason why they moved on from RG3 being the backup in the offseason, because Tyler Huntley is basically like a Walmart brand Lamar Jackson. If I'm being honest, like he can make plays on the ground. He can throw the ball pretty well also. He's the perfect backup for what the Baltimore Ravens are trying to do in their offensive system. And I think that they could rattle off some wins. Obviously, the offense has a much higher ceiling when Lamar Jackson is in at quarterback under center. But I think Tyler Huntley's been doing just fine. And even though he didn't win, this past Sunday, I don't think he did all that bad, considering the circumstances.
I do think their biggest issue is their schedule going out. It's very difficult. They got the Packers, Bengals, Rams, and Steelers. So it's not, two of those teams already lost to, and then the other teams are teams that are two of the best in the entire league. That's not a lot of recipe for success if you don't have Lamar Jackson. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they can do here. Obviously, I think it's a grab shoot for Tyler Huntley. He can make some money potentially if he comes back and wins. But Oscar, thank you for your fantasy and injury reports. Now, Connor, it's time to make some money. It's week 15. A lot of playoff implications on the line. Which one of these sporting line? Well, you have 4 games here you're looking at. Where are you putting your money this week?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I'm just gonna get right to it. First game that I'm gonna be talking about this week, it's gonna be the New England Patriots versus the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts are favored by 2.5 points, and the over/under is 45.5. Now the Patriots are looking like the best team in the AFC right now. They're sitting at the 1 seed on a 7-game win streak, and they're looking to continue that coming off a bye with a rejuvenated defense, a great run game and offensive line, an efficient quarterback, and great weapons in the pass game for Mac as well. Considering the Colts, they're another team that started off pretty slow early on the season, but are now looking pretty legit and could enter into one of the wild card spots in the AFC with a win. Now, with the Pats defense being pretty well equipped to stop the run and neutralize Jonathan Taylor, Wentz will need to carry this team to a win. And with the Colts offensive scheme, honestly don't know if he could really do that. I don't necessarily trust him 100% in order to, carry the Colts team to a win against a really tough Patriots team. So I'm going to pick the Pats to win and cover. This next game, probably the most boring matchup of the entire week. The Houston Texans take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars are favored by 3.5 points, and the over/under is 39.5. Pretty low. Now, like I said earlier, pretty boring matchup. 2 terrible teams that are already mathematically eliminated from the playoffs that not only suck, but also suck to watch, which are the absolute worst kind of teams. Now, the Texans already upset the Jags in week 1, and while they honestly might be worse than they were then, with Philip Lindsay leaving, Mark Ingram being traded back to the Saints, et cetera, they did beat the Titans, who the Jags were shut out by this past Sunday. Also, at this point in his career, honestly, I think Davis Mills is probably better than Trevor Lawrence somehow at this point. I'm going to pick the Texans to win this game. And I'll pick them to cover also. This next matchup, 2 potential wildcard playoff teams. The Denver Broncos versus the Cincinnati Bengals. The Broncos are favored by a point, and the over/under is 43.5. Now, Broncos and Bengals, 2 teams who we didn't really expect to be in the playoff picture this late in the season, but here we are. Now, this Broncos defense is good, and offensively, Teddy's efficient in his game manager role. While the true star of this offense might be rookie running back Javonte Williams, one of the top running backs in terms of broken tackles. He's an absolute stud. Meanwhile, the Bengals, like I've talked about earlier on in this podcast, they've been a bit inconsistent as of late. But when they put everything together, they look like the team to beat in the AFC North, in my humble opinion. Simply put, I think the Bengals are a playoff team, and I think the Broncos aren't. So the Bengals win and cover. And this last matchup that I'm going to be talking about, I included this in a 5K parlay the other day. The Atlanta Falcons take on the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners are favored by 9.5 points, and the over-under is 46. Now, the Falcons are somewhat interesting this year, as while they aren't a good team, I think we all know that, they're still somehow in the playoff picture. And their signing of running back Daryl Patterson proves to be a great move for the franchise with his breakout season. Meanwhile, the 49ers are looking like they'll be back in the playoffs as the 6th seed, most likely, where they're sitting right now. They're well-built offensively, and while there are some cracks in their secondary, I think their defense is overall pretty good, particularly their defensive line. The Falcons' defense, on the other hand, is terrible most of the time, and the Niners' offense could easily score at least 25 points, if not more, when they play them. Niners win and cover. And those are my 4 Week 15 NFL matchups.
Yeah, for me, I definitely like those road dogs from the Patriots and the Texans, just because when it comes to the Colts, even back to their days of Manning, you can't really trust them against the Patriots. I don't know what their overall. Actually, hold on, I kind of looked that up real quick. There's this website, Colts Patriots series. I'd have to venture that the amount of times the Colts have beaten Bill Belichick in Indianapolis is perhaps on a single hand. Yeah, hold on. Because the last time the Colts beat the Patriots was 2009. They beat them in 2008. They had a 3-game winning streak in the mid-2000s. But otherwise, since the beginning of this century, the Patriots have had the Colts number. Yeah, just how much should a better kind of incorporate that when you – and I know obviously most of that was with Tom Brady, but Bill Belichick is still there. And it's going to be really interesting to see how he schemes for Jonathan Taylor. And because I imagine what he's going to do, he's going to try to force the game into the hands of Carson Wentz, who obviously he's been playing a lot better in the second half of the year, but he's still prone to making critical mistakes, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think Carson Wentz is a pretty good quarterback, especially within his situation and what he's required to do for this offense. Especially considering Jonathan Taylor is probably the number one piece of that Colts offense. I mean, yeah, like you said, the Patriots have had the Colts number. I mean, even with like a Hall of Fame quarterback like Peyton Manning, most of the time they'd be crushed by the Patriots, and also including Andrew Luck. Of course, there was that infamous AFC Championship game, I think in 2014, where they were absolutely blown out.
Do you think they could get lucky? Sorry to interrupt, but do you think the Colts could get lucky and maybe knock off the Patriots by 3? Because I think it's possible.
It's possible, but I doubt it. When I was talking earlier about Wentz needing to carry this team to a win, with the Pats defense being well equipped to neutralize their run game, something that I thought of while writing that down was the Colts Bucks game. I think a couple weeks ago, where Jonathan Taylor didn't look like as elite as he did the prior week in Buffalo. And Carson Wentz had to like throw the ball quite a bit more. And I mean, like, he was pretty good. But that last drive, I think he threw an interception. Like when you really challenge the Colts offensive philosophy, and you force them to put the ball in the hands of Carson Wentz and see if he can make plays, I don't necessarily trust that he could do that, every single time, especially without, offensive game plan in terms of the run game that's firing on all cylinders.
To me, they're a split image of the Titans. Like, just obviously with the Titans, when Derrick Henry is healthy, your number one goal is to stop number 22. Like, when the Colts' number one goal right now is to stop number 28. And both teams are then getting into bad positions when you stop their star running back.
Would you take an under on this game possibly? Because these are two really good defenses, and the Colts defense is kind of underrated because they've been overshadowed by other great defenses in the league. You think an under would be a healthy bet? Maybe we look at a game 23-20 final score.
Yeah, I don't think that would be out of question. I mean, you look at that Pats Bills game, I think like a week ago, it was like 14-10. You know, and I mean, of course, that was in like terrible weather conditions. But you know, with
Indianapolis is a dome, so do keep that in mind too. Mac Jones will actually be throwing the ball in this game.
yeah, that's true. But I'm gonna check the over again. I think it was like 40. Yeah, it was 45.5. I don't think it's out of the realm of question. I think I'd probably trust the under a bit more than the over with this matchup.
Yeah, I think that like Michael Pittman Jr. J.C. Jackson matchup is going to be interesting. I think Jackson locks him down, but going offense and defense going on the other way of the ball, vice versa. It just seems like it's going to be a low scoring game for some reason. I honestly think they might be able to get an upset. The Colts. I don't know why. It's just I'm feeling it.
The Colts are the favorites though by 2.5 points, which is kind of asinine with how well the Patriots have been playing. You know, because I know the Colts have the home game here, but I think the Patriots are a better football team. They shouldn't be like massive favorites, but I think the Patriots should be like a 1 or 2 point favorite here, not the Colts. So it feels like they're getting that just because it is a home field game, which tells me that on a neutral site field that the Patriots would be like a 0.5 point favorite. And I feel like the Patriots are at least a bit better than that, than the Colts, or against the Colts. So I think because to me, I think the Colts are a good football team. I think the Patriots are a really, really good football team because they can win in a lot of different ways, which is always really dangerous to go up against because you never know what they're going to do. I mean, did the Bills know that Bill Belichick was going to come out and run and throw 3 times? No. He's super unpredictable, but that's what makes Bill Belichick one of the greatest coaches of all time because you just never know how he's going to approach a game. And I feel like this is going to be one of those other games where he's going to show up with a really, really weird game plan. Yeah, so that'll certainly be, I think that'll be one of the best games of the week, if not the best game of the week. But moving on from that, thank you, Connor, for the Ben Line segment. It's time to kind of begin wrapping up the show with our Player of the Week segment. I always like shouting out some of the best performances of the week. We'll start off with you, Leon. Who is your Player of the Week?
I'm going to have to give it to Vikings running back Dalvin Cook, 205 yards, 2 touchdowns. I wish he broke Adrian Peterson's 296-yard record. I wish they ran the ball more in the second half, but Cook is 22 yards away from another 1,000-yard season. A top 5 running back in the league for sure, but yeah, like I said before, Vikings are not making playoffs this season.
Oscar, who is your Player of the Week?
My Player of the week was Rashad Penny. Like I said, I've been able to follow this guy coming out of the draft with the Seahawks in the rookie year, and how all the expectations were. I mean, they started even when Marshawn Lynch was still the running back for the Seahawks. So I think it's really cool to see, and I wish him the best of luck. I think he can have a lot of success with the Seahawks.
Connor, who is your Player of the Week?
My Player of the Week is Aaron Rodgers, quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. He went 29 for 37 pass attempts, threw 4 touchdowns, completing a little over 78% of his passes, with a 104.1 passer rating. Like I said, best quarterback in the NFL this year. Easy.
All right, so my Player of the Week in a tight loss, James Conner, a running back for the Arizona Cardinals. He had 125 all-purpose yards. He had 9 receptions for 94 yards. He ran for an additional 31 and had 2 touchdowns rushing. To me, even though the Cardinals' offense was really struggling at times, they couldn't get the ball to DeAndre Hopkins. Kyler Murray was under a lot of pressure from the Rams' front 7. James Conner was definitely a safety valve for him. Really was able to do some damage in the passing game. He's really developed that aspect because he was good at it in Pittsburgh, but he's really, I think, excelling at that aspect of his game now. And it's been really important considering that Chase Edmonds has been hurt for a couple of weeks. He might come back in the next few weeks. But until that happens, James Conner is going to be very important for this Cardinals offense. And I know they didn't win, but certainly his contributions kept him around that game and gave him that chance at the end after they recovered the onside kick. So my player of the week is James Conner. Certainly an X factor for the Arizona Cardinals. All right, so Leon, I want to share our picks for this upcoming Thursday night game. Finally, a good matchup on paper, at least, between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers. Who did we all go with?
We all are going with the Chiefs. Looks like it's going to be a shootout where defense doesn't exist. That concept will not happen. But I do think one of these quarterbacks will throw for over 400 yards, if not both. I think both definitely over 350 or 300. But yeah, 350, it's bold, but I'm going to say it. Nick, you choose 31-30 Chiefs. Connor, 38-31 Chiefs. Oscar, 34-28 Chiefs. I think the Chiefs put up another 40-plus game. 41-34 Chiefs. Like I said, defense will not exist in this game, and both quarterbacks will play tremendous. But the Chiefs have recovered from that atrocious start to the season. And like I said before, I wasn't sure who the number 2 team in the league is now in the AFC, but I'll give it to them right now.
I will say, though, even though I picked the Chiefs, I honestly wouldn't be all that surprised if the Chargers did win this game. I mean, like the Chiefs offense did bounce back playing the Raiders. But there were a couple games, within this past 4-week stretch where the defense somehow was carrying this team. I mean, I still don't necessarily completely trust this Chiefs team. I don't think they're the same Chiefs team that we've seen from 2018 onward. It will be interesting to see how the rest of this season shakes out as well as this postseason. I think they're definitely they are going to playoffs. Obviously, I think they could easily win the AFC West for sure. But what happens in January, who knows, honestly.
Yeah, and I'll say this as well. The Chargers did win a week 2 against the Chiefs, so it's definitely within the realm possible. That's why I only picked the Chiefs by 1 point. I don't trust the Chargers in this spot. That they kind of have to break some narratives here. They have to break some perceptions. I don't trust them to win this big game, even though they have the talent to win this game. They're at home, which granted doesn't really matter that much because Chargers home games are home games with a lot of visiting fans in the stands. But I just trust Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid to find a way to win this one. That's what my pick comes down to.
Yeah, I also don't. I don't think that there's going to be no defense. I think the Chiefs' defense is why they've lasted so long and why they've been able to stick in with the playoff race. So I think they're going to show up. And I think for the Chargers, they really need to have a healthy Austin Eckler to be able to have a balanced offense and be able to challenge that Chiefs defense. So I think that depends on it a lot. And yeah, let's see. Let's go Chiefs.
I do think this could possibly be better than the Chargers and Steelers game a couple weeks back in a game of the year matchup. This could possibly be a game of the year matchup. It could be a shootout. It might not be. But if Herbert throws more than one interception, I expect it to be done right away for them.
Yeah, certainly taking care of the football is going to be massive. And perhaps getting some turnovers of your own because the Chargers defense has not been very good this year. But, if you can get some takeaways, because, Patrick Mahomes, I believe outside of his best 5 games, has had 9 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, which is really unusual for him. I think that's certainly the key to success for the Los Angeles Chargers. All right, before we close, does anyone have any last points or questions before we wrap up?
All right, so separated from NFL football. Y'all might know that Spider-Man No Way Home, or whatever the new Spider-Man movie's called, that's coming out on Thursday. I just gotta say, some advice: block LaShawn McCoy on Instagram before you watch that movie. Y'all know what he did with Avengers Endgame. He spoiled Tony Stark being dead. A lot of people were mad at him. People wanted him to be cut from the Bills after that tweet. So yeah, block him on Twitter before you watch this movie. Because some shit's about to happen in there. Oh, yeah.
That doesn't matter. It doesn't. We're on TV.
Yeah.
Nobody's watching. It's all right.
But yeah, One more thing. Giants tank for Pickett or get Wilson in the offseason. That's all I'm going to say.
You don't have to tank for Pickett. Pickett will fall to wherever the Giants are at. So
keep tanking.
Yeah. I mean, you might as well at this point. It doesn't matter. You might as well try out Jake from Jake Fromm out on the field. The guy who single-handedly prevented Georgia from winning a national title while he was there. Obviously LaShawn McCoy or anyone. I mean, honestly, the best advice to me to all of you in situations like that are to just mute certain words on Twitter in your account. Just block them out for a certain amount of time. Like obviously, block out Peter Parker, block out Dr. Ox, Dr. Strange, Mary Jane, unless you're an avid weed user, and that should keep you that should keep you safe from any Spider-Man spoilers after this weekend. But anyway, that's going to be all for the Insta Review podcast. Thank you again for watching for this NFL and kind of a sneak peek of our upcoming film podcast. We will see you again next week for week 15 of our week 15 podcast. Man, the playoffs are coming. We are going to be there every step of the way. We're definitely going to do our playoff episodes here very, very soon, which are going to be very exciting, as we're soon going to find out who is going to lift that Lombardi trophy. So, from Leon Taryan, Conor Kennedy, and Oscar Orengo, I'm Nicholas Hill. Thank you for watching, and take care of everyone, and we'll see you again next Tuesday night.